Nothing spicy at all, and I got really, really sick. Not all spicy.
And on that note, I want to welcome everybody to the world according to that man, Benjamin Jeremy Stein. It is a twosome tonight.
You don't know my name. That's funny.
It is, yes, I don't. Ben, I'm getting, it's contagious. Sometimes you call me.
What do I call you?
Sometimes you call me Jeff or Glenn or Bob. And, tonight I
Some may call me Bobby and some may call me Zimmy.
But I want to welcome everybody to this.
Who knows what that's from?
What is it from?
Well, it's a Bob Dylan song, Bobby and Zimmy. Who could it be but Robert Zimmerman, also known as Bob Dylan?
What an interesting story, by the way. Just what an interesting, and we discussed a little.
The guy is, well, let me just say this. He was, until I'd say early 80s, an extraordinary, unbelievable genius. Somehow, at least to me, he's lost it totally. He is still performing, which I don't think he should be doing, but he likes it. God bless him.
His last album was like number one. It got great reviews, but you never know if it's really.
Not heard it. I have a very close friend, very, very close friend. He used to be my student, named John Mankiewicz, from that very, very famous Hollywood Mankiewicz family, and he has told me various recent Bob Dylan songs that he says are just great, and I can't listen to them at all. And my wonderful, wonderful, wonderful friend, Phil DeMuth, who's also a huge Dylan fan, tells me he can't listen to anything within the last 40-some years from Dylan.
Okay, I'm going to challenge that, but I want to welcome everybody to the world according to that man, Benjamin Jeremy Stein. I want to thank everybody that's been downloading the podcast. Please keep downloading the podcast. For some reason, we opened at number 9 in Switzerland today. So thank you, the Swiss. And we are honored and privileged. I've always liked
Swiss steak.
I've always liked Swiss cheese and Swiss chocolate. And so who's ever listening, whoever you are in Switzerland, thank you.
Yes, God bless you.
We are humbled by that. And this show wouldn't be complete, of course, without actor, writer, provocateur, saint sinner, lover, grandfather, father.
Doctor.
Always ruin the intro. And of course, the man with the most tender hands in America, Dr. Benjamin Jeremy Stein. How are you?
These are hands many a human being wishes, prays he or she had these hands. With these hands, I can make dinner for my wife, the world's most outstanding human, every night. And she always enjoys it and eats it very quickly. In fact, we have one of our nurses bring it upstairs to her while I'm still cooking my portion. And by the time I get up the stairs, she has eaten hers.
Riveting. And but before we were talking for a second, and you brought up Phil DeMuth saying Dylan hasn't anything good, had anything good.
In 40, in roughly.
I challenge that because in 1988, I believe, he was part of the greatest super group.
You know what? You're right. But that wasn't Bob by himself, but he definitely was one of the founding members and an outstandingly important member of the Traveling Wilburys. But let's remember, the first Traveling Wilburys was great, a classic that everyone in the world has to own. Second one, I couldn't listen to.
Well, it was minus Roy Orbison. I mean, that was,
okay, that's still, I mean,
like when
Bob Dylan is the genius.
You and I have listened to that Traveling Wilburys album incessantly over and over together.
But the second one, I can't listen to with all due
respect. It's unlistenable. Yeah. And I'm convinced a lot of that had to do with there's something about Roy Orbison's voice when he comes into a song that just makes everything. I agree. Everything better.
I've loved him. I've met him. Unlike you, I have met him. So there you are.
But, you had met him.
I met him before when he was still.
Well, how did you meet him? Actually, now I'm curious.
Just in first class on a flight from I believe it was from L.A. to New York, and I was sitting. I don't remember what row, but it was in the days when first class was really nice, before it was garbage, which it is now, and. I think I was sitting in the second row, and he was, I think, sitting at I was on the aisle, and I think he was on the aisle in the middle. And I said, you look an awful lot like Roy Orbison. You can't possibly be Roy Orbison. And he said, you look a lot like Ben Stein. Can you be Ben Stein? And I said, yes, I am Ben Stein. And God bless you. And
oh my God, that's a classic story.
Well, I have met a lot of people. I
But no, hold on a second. You said exactly the same thing you said to Elvis.
No. I said, Mr. Presley, the whole world is your fans, but I am your biggest fan. My name is Ben Stein. God bless you. I'm incredibly overwhelmed to meet you. God bless you. And he said, thank you very much. And
I love that story, but I love the Roy Orbison story. That's an incredible. I mean, that's freaking Roy Orbison, man. I
know. And you know what Bob Dylan said when he met Roy Orbison?
What?
He just walked around him like walking around a giant tree and said, wow.
That's pretty damn cool. Yeah. That is, and on that note, but like that's incredible, actually. The Roy Orbison thing is him saying you're Ben Stein.
Well, I will tell you that it used to be that your humble servant, this old man talking to you, used to be flying first class all around the country all the time, 50 or 60 speeches a year. The pandemic put the brakes on that. And anyway, I met a lot of famous people. Long before that, when wifey and I had a home in Aspen, Colorado, which, by the way, was a very strange place. I still can't get the strangeness of it out of my mind. We met Diana Ross. She was sitting in first class on an airplane wearing a beautiful fur coat. I don't think she would wear it today, but there she was. And I didn't talk to her. She showed no sign of having anyone want to talk to her. And once I sat next to Sybil Shepherd on an airplane. I've always thought she was incredibly beautiful. And I started to talk to her, and she just nodded. And I said that we have a mutual friend, and a woman named Deanne Barkley, one of the greats in Hollywood, one of the greatest women in Hollywood, who invented the made-for-TV movie. And she said something like, "That's very nice, but I have to sleep." And she put her fur coat over her head and ignored me the rest of the trip.
And on that note, I want to just tell everybody, these are the just normal discussions that people should be having. Whoever I was thinking today, Ben, I don't know when politics became a religion. And I don't know when that's the only thing that people
always,
but I don't know that that's when that was the only things people spoke about. I don't know when people stopped having normal. No, I mean, I've never in my wildest dreams, Ben, thought that every moment of every day, politics would be the top thing that people, it wasn't always.
It is in your life, and you're incredibly well informed about it, and it makes up a huge part of your life. But bear in mind, I am an old man. I have a wifey. We have been together since 1966. That's a really long time. She's a saint. She's an incredibly wonderful human being. We have a lot in common. We have a lot of memories, especially for some reason, I don't know why, of Yale Law School, where I was a student, and she was at Vassar, but was taking undergrad classes at Yale and also working at Yale. And we have a lot to talk about those days. And we have a lot to talk about our early days in Hollywood. Interesting facts.
But my point was that we're having what should be normal conversations.
Yes, and you are, yes, and I'm glad you brought that up.
And that's what's been lost, is this normal conversation.
Years ago, my very good friend, Bob Bartley, who was the editor of the editorial page of the Wall Street Journal, and very, very, very nice guy, and extremely kind fan of mine, who gave me a superb job when Mr. Rumsfeld fired me at the White House. And he came to Hollywood once, and he said he'd like to meet some important people. And I took him and Michael Eisner, who was then head of Paramount, and Deanne Barkley, who was then a very, very high official at NBC, out to dinner at the old La Scala before it became just a trashy cafeteria. Yeah. And we were just talking about movie stars and movies we liked and records we liked. And Deanne said, "This is a typical American conversation. This is what a conversation is supposed to be." And you're right. That's exactly right.
And I don't know where that, I mean, obviously it's been lost for a while, but wanted to.
It's not totally lost. I mean, my sister.
No, it's not. No, but even when when you're having a conversation with a certain family member, when you have to put on the brakes.
You're right.
And you know It's almost it's almost like conversations that have become so stilted because everybody's scared to death of, well, offending somebody or losing a family member or losing a friend.
Just having a fight. I mean, nobody wants to have a fight over the telephone. No. I have a very close family member whom I love a lot, who is completely diametrically opposed to me on almost every issue in politics that there could possibly be, and lots of things about race, really about race, and so we have to guard our conversation. But you know what? Even within that ambit, there's much to talk about. We both are very interested in restaurants. We're both very interested in fiction. We're both very interested in historical books. And so we find a lot to talk about. We talk a lot about our parents, and our parents have been dead for a long time, which is really sad. And we find a lot to talk about them. I mean, I always tell you, Judah, and I'm not kidding, be thankful your parents are alive.
I am extremely blessed that my parents are both still alive and that I have a great relationship with them. I am extremely blessed with that. And but I wanted to let's move a little past it, because you called me today and I interrupted you and I said save it for the show when you were reading something in the Wall Street Journal that I have no idea what it is.
Oh yeah, it was an editorial about the collapse of Afghanistan, of the pro-Western government in Afghanistan, and it made this point. Yes, maybe it was inevitable that we would lose in Afghanistan, but it wasn't inevitable that we would lose in this rapid, disgraceful way. There was I believe that this quote from Winston Churchill refers to a very important British garrison on the Mediterranean Sea in North Africa called Tobruk. And Tobruk was incredibly important because it held out against Erwin Rommel when all the rest of the area had been overrun by the Afrika Korps, and it was a thorn in Rommel's side, and it really slowed him down a lot. Without Tobruk, it was very possible that Rommel would have taken Cairo and Suez, and very conceivably made the English sue for peace, which was really, I mean, Tobruk was incredibly important. And then later on, more or less by the way, Tobruk fell, and Churchill was just stunned that it fell, and it fell without much of a resistance. And Churchill said, I think this was about Tobruk, but it might have been about the British defeat in Greece. He said, there is defeat and then there is disgrace. And true enough about Afghanistan. The Russians were defeated there long before the British were defeated there. Pretty much everyone's defeated there. But there is defeat and there is disgrace. We could have held out a lot longer. We should have held out a lot longer. We have a very large army and the best air force in the world. And we, for some reason, I don't know why, refused to use our air force against the Taliban. I don't know why. I have no idea whether that was, I think Biden did not do that. I think Trump did that. Why, I do not know. Yeah, but anyway, so we could have slowed them down a lot. It is a big thing to be moving across the desert, even in a convoy of Toyota trucks, and have an American airplane come down and strafe you and blow you to pieces with 20-millimeter shells. And we said we weren't going to do that, in return for which they said they would not advance beyond a certain line. And they just completely lied and advanced beyond that line. And now we are putting up only the most token resistance, and these armed forces in Afghanistan, on which we've spent apparently something on the order of $85 billion arming them, and they have better arms than some of our own units, are being just ripped to shreds by the Taliban, who are these raggedy old guys with raggedy old World War II or Soviet era weapons. And this did not have to happen. America could have stiffened the resolve of the Afghan forces and made a slow retreat instead of a total humiliating collapse. We've had too much humiliation in America in the last couple of decades. Too much humiliation. How long has it been since we won a war? I mean, yes, we won Desert Storm 1. we sort of thought we won Desert Storm 2. That turned out not to be anywhere near as much of a victory as we thought it was. But it's been a long time since we've won a war quite cleanly and unequivocally. That's been way too long.
I don't believe there's ever going to be winning a war in that region. So
well, let's back up. Are we sure of that? Because there is that depends on what you call that region.
Well, I'm talking about with Afghanistan. I'm not referring to Israel and its surrounding areas. I'm referring
to no one thought Israel could beat all these Arab countries with their very determined mujahideen and falaheen and so forth.
Yeah.
But
isn't the Taliban the mujahideen? Isn't that an offspring?
Yes, the Taliban and the mujahids are the same. I could be wrong.
So if you're just tuning in, you are listening to The World According to Ben Stein. It's Ben and myself.
Ben and I.
Thank you. And we're just having a conversation like people have. And but you the other day on the show, and I'm not as familiar with this, and because I'm just not as familiar with it, I didn't see it visually. But I wanted to talk about the 70s because it's.
Can we stop for just a second?
Yes, of course.
Back up to what we were talking about the Wall Street Journal. The Wall Street Journal made this point, which I think is a really, really, really important point. It took a lot of ignorance on the part of Mr. Biden to not see this coming. And it took a fair amount of ignorance on the part of Mr. Trump to not see this coming. And the whole history of dealing with the Mujids and the Afghan rebels is that they are ferocious, tenacious, cannot be trusted, like to kill, like to fight, don't mind dying, and they will just pursue everything till everybody else is gone. And then rebels will spring up, will fight against the Mujids, the Northern Alliance, for example, which helped us a lot when we initially took over the country, as it turned out, rather temporarily. So Mr. Trump, I think, and also certainly Mr. Biden, did not understand.
I have to disagree with you on this one.
Perpetual warfare there.
I have to disagree with you on this one because we don't know. We all we have is with Trump was proof of the success he had in those regions with deals that he brokered. So we don't know if his threats, because I do believe they would have believed Trump would have bombed the crap out of them.
Yeah, but why did Trump forswear the use of American air power? I mean, what was going on with that? That was a tremendous mistake. I mean, that was our big power card. Why did we throw away?
Because I don't think he wanted. Because I think most people, Ben, don't want to be in war. They didn't realize.
I know, but we don't want to lose wars either.
I don't think. But we discussed this the other day. There is no what is winning. What does winning look like? We've been discussing this for 25 years. There,
it looks a hell of a lot different from what's happening now. What's happening now is, as I said, quoting Winston Churchill, probably the greatest man who lived certainly in the last 150 years, is there is defeat, inevitable in war, and there is disgrace. And what we are seeing now in Afghanistan is not just defeat, but disgrace.
So my point being is we don't know how it would have looked with Trump. Trump was, if I am to believe what I have read, and I could be wrong, really
was the one, yes, exactly, who forswore using American air power. I mean, I don't know if you're aware of what an American attack helicopter can do, but they can really do a hell of a lot of damage, and we have a lot of them. And why we did not use them is a mystery to me.
But again,
why
Ben,
we're not using them right now is a mystery to me.
Ben, but again, this is over 7 months since he
I agree.
And I think it's a bigger point what you raised the other night. I don't think it's ineptitude. I think it's subversion within I think that word you used, and I
said the question is, are they idiots? And I said, no, I think perhaps they're worse than that. I think they're subversives. But let me back up a little bit. We have a principle in law wifey and I are lawyers, and something I learned. I'm not sure I learned it in law school, but something I learned when I was teaching law. I taught law for a long time. People seem to forget that, but that's okay. And that is that at a certain point, negligence and incompetence are so bad that they are the equivalent of intentional malice. And if and also another principle of law is that a defendant may be held to be responsible and to intentionally cause the inevitable consequence of his or her actions. Now, Mr. Biden has done things that are the inevitable result of which is the Taliban taking over the country and torturing, killing, raping, murdering a great many innocent people and people who trusted America. So to the extent that the things he did were so clearly able to be foreseen as causing the demolition of Afghanistan, I think it can be held to be intentional.
That's exactly very well said. And if you just tuned in, you are listening to The World According to Ben Stein. Please keep downloading those episodes, and please subscribe to our email, benstein.substack.com. I want to bring up something interesting, and I don't know if you feel comfortable talking about it, but you know how we're always talking about that you could every once in a while you could find a judge. Well, your friend from New York City, your wifey's friend, found a judge.
Yes. Good for you for knowing about this.
Yeah.
Good for you, Judah M. Friedman, for knowing about this.
So for those that are not familiar with this, Ben Stein is very good friends with Linda Fairstein. Stein or Steen? Stein. It's always confusing, even for a Jew. And she was slandered in that Netflix documentary by Ava DuVernay about DuVernay about the excuse me,
the Central Park jogger case, and she was slandered, and this was, by the way, produced by the great genius Oprah Winfrey, and it was called the documentary, so-called documentary. It obviously was not a documentary, at least as far as the court found. Was about supposedly how the New York prosecutors and police went after these young men solely because they were Black and not because they actually had done any crime. A white woman, had been grabbed, knocked unconscious, and repeatedly raped in a horrible place called Morningside Park. And which I know it very well because it's right next to Columbia. And I may say that even 1962 to 66, when I was at Columbia, we didn't dare go near it. So anyone who goes into it now has got to be crazy. But anyway, she was knocked unconscious, raped. Somehow there was a confession or conversation among the kids in the neighborhood that these 5 young men had been the culprits. They were brought in for questioning. One of them said something that implicated the others. The others confessed, and they were convicted of assault and rape and so forth. And then a couple of years later, they found near the scene of the crime some semen, and they were able to connect it with the semen of a homeless man who was, at that time, I think, in prison for something else. And so it was held that the conviction against these young men was faulty. And then they were released and given a huge, staggering amount of money. And the movie made it seem as if Linda Fairstein had intentionally gone after them, knowing the case was weak, knowing there was very little evidence, and was totally racially motivated by racial bias. None of this was true. Linda was not in charge of the case. She was at a much, much higher level of administration than that, hardly had anything to do with the case at all. And they simply made up words.
5 scenes.
To say
5 scenes.
That she never was even in those.
Five scenes in a documentary.
And she sued Netflix, and I think maybe Oprah and maybe Ms. DuVernay. And it's very, I also used to teach libel law. It's very, very hard to get a conviction if you're a public figure. Get a verdict if you're a public figure in a libel case. Really, really hard. She had a great lawyer, and she got one. And now she did not win on every count. There are 12 allegations. She didn't get all of the win on all of them. She won on enough of them to give Netflix a severe kick in the teeth. And it really is a showing that you can occasionally get a really good judge. And this brings me to something you and I and our friends on the show often discuss. Might we be able someday to get a judge who can rule on the fraudulence of some of the allegations against Trump and his supporters?
And many other things that have to do with the elections. And on a side note,
well,
to everybody,
and many things have to do with Hunter Biden. I mean, the fact that this man is at large, is free as a bird, when we know so much about his what seemed to me to be his criminal activities. Maybe I'm wrong.
You're not wrong.
It's astonishing. It's absolutely astonishing why there is not a prosecutor willing to take it up, why there's not a judge willing to take it up. That's a mystery to me.
It shouldn't be a mystery to you. Look at Cuomo in New York City. I mean, like let's look no further. And I predict he might not resign, or he might take back his resignation. That's a prediction that I am making because he gave himself 14 days, but that's neither here nor there. 1970s, and somebody brought up something, and I want to get to somebody brought up something. You're right. One of the things that's an uncomfortable thing, and Ben and I, even in our conversations, if we talk about it, we don't get in depth often enough. I know his views on abortion. I have certain views on abortion, but the one thing that's so important about the abortion topic, other than the abortion ban, is, as we were discussing before the show, as you've chronicled and said so much lately about the death of the Constitution, the true tracing. I mean, you could really trace 1973 to the death of the beginning of the death of the Constitution with Roe v. Wade.
I can actually earlier than that to Griswold versus Connecticut. Griswold versus Connecticut was a case in, obviously, Connecticut, in which Connecticut, which is a very largely Roman Catholic state, had ruled that you could not sell birth control devices in drugstores, or maybe even, I don't think there were any birth control pills at that time, but you could not sell condoms or any of the diaphragms or any of those things. And a man named, whether it was a man or woman, I'm not sure which, named Griswold, sued the state of Connecticut, and the Supreme Court found that there were emanations, not any actual language, but emanations in the Constitution that created a right of privacy. From there, it was a short hop, skip, and a jump to saying those emanations also permitted abortion. Now, that was a gigantic step because now here, some people, the person closest to me in the whole world and I have somewhat of a difference. That was a gigantic step, and that was not really in the Constitution. I learned this from Robert Bork, my constitutional law teacher at Yale, a true genius, and he was absolutely right. From after that, it was Katie bar the door. There is no more Constitution, and right now we're seeing it in spades. We're seeing it in spades, in which we have a situation in which in the last election, there were questionable things happening. I gather we're not allowed to talk about them, which is itself a violation of the First Amendment, but there are very questionable things happening, and the courts are not allowed to take it up.
Amazing that the courts can't take that up, but because you see, here's the bigger question, Ben, right? So when we talk about law, we talk about the Talmud, right? I mean, most law comes from the Talmud, right? I mean, I think it's fair to say some of it, so much, I mean, the Talmud is law. And the Constitution is our law. And so much of the discussions, if you ever were to read the Talmud, was you could extrapolate this from this. Anywhere in the Constitution, could you have extrapolated abortion from anything the founders were talking about? I dare anybody to show me one place.
Well, my dear friend, now you really have struck a very rich vein in Ben Stein's brain, because
that's the
at law school, I could not figure out why do we have some cases where the facts are very clearly X, Y, and Z, and the judge rules one way, and another case where the facts are the same facts, X, Y, and Z, and the judge rules the other way. Never could understand it. I was there for 2.5 years, couldn't understand it, mystified, managed to have a very good time anyway in law school. And then my brother-in-law, a very, very smart lawyer named Melvin Epstein, said it's because of legal realism, which was discovered and promulgated at Yale by a man named Tommy Emerson and Fred Rodell. And they said judges just decide based on what they feel like. And they can just hate a defendant, hate a lawyer, hate a plaintiff, and they will find a reason to have a case come out the way it did. And they will always find a precedent to say that's why they're making the decision. Because in any important appellate case, there will be two sides. Otherwise, it wouldn't get to the Supreme Court or to a high court of appeals. So there will always be plenty of precedent on either side. It just depends on how the court is feeling. And how the court is feeling depends in large part on what the mood of the day is and what the media is saying. And the media in this country has become a solid iron curtain of leftist, anti-constitutional, anti-American, anti-white person, anti-male thought. And this is, to me, a very scary situation.
Okay, so you brought up I want to take it to the next step now. Okay, you hit Judah's brain vein. And, you talk about legal realism, right? Let's go to religious realism, right? Because that's been a huge thing. That's the bastardization of many religions, of especially the Judeo-Christian religion. Now, me growing up in an observant, obviously that's the observant Jews live a little differently, and the reforms have sort of bastardized it. Conservatives have sort of bastardized it just for their own free will. I mean, just for their own, not free will, for their own. It's just easier, Ben. It's just easier to drive on the Sabbath than it is to walk. It's just easier to turn. But I had a rabbi, and I went to him one time, and I asked him a question. I needed to get an answer on something, and he wouldn't give me the answer I wanted. And I remember thinking to myself, I'll just go ask another rabbi. I didn't end up doing that. I trusted what this rabbi said because I looked at him to be a brilliant and wise man. But that's the same thing. It's legal realism turned into religious realism, and they almost they're almost all together back.
And it's now also in medical realism. And I will give you a really, 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 really good example. That's a terrifying example. There is a terrible mental disease known as schizophrenia. It's a very, very serious disease, and people who suffer from it are really suffering. It's not a joke. And for generations, it was held that the cause of schizophrenia was the schizophrenogenic mother, which is to say a mother who could not be counted on or relied upon by the child, and therefore the child felt he or she had no anchor in the world and was just spinning around like a compass without knowing where there was true north. And then mothers formed a lobby, and the lobby of the mothers said, no, it can't be that. It can't be us. It couldn't be us. It has to be genetic. It has to be something they inherited. And they persuaded the medical establishment to say, no, there is no such thing as a schizophrenogenic mother. There is only genetics. Now, maybe that's true. Maybe it isn't. My point is, even in medicine, so-called science, although, boy, science is a nonsense word today, political power and media power controls everything.
So take it one step further. Let's use another word that they love to use, which is dysmorphia, right? Body dysmorphia.
Yes.
So if you have, let's say, anorexia, or bulimia, it's a form of body dysmorphia where you look at yourself and you're not seeing things accurately and for what they are. And I've brought this up on the show, and I've said this to you before. Nobody says to an anorexic, "You look great, lose more weight."
Oh my God.
So obviously people that are transgendered are seeing something that isn't real. they're seeing, they feel something. They look in the mirror and they might see a woman. Well, you're not seeing a woman. You're seeing your views are distorted. Yet people have said now, Ben, you like just like you wouldn't say to the anorexic, lose some weight. People are saying to the person that's feeling that or that's living that, well, cut your you know what off, and that'll change everything.
Yeah,
Not go get mental help, not seek counseling, not seek something. So another form of distorted realism or truthism has, as you brought up.
Absolutely. This is absolutely right. And at least I think it's right. When you hear of stories, which I have recently heard from my doctor, of a 3-year-old saying, I want to change my gender, and the parents going along with it, you have to understand that there's something severely anti-science and anti-truth. The science at some level has to be about truth. Otherwise, it's not science. So but
science realism.
It's all become politics now. It's all become politics, and that's very, very true about lesbianism, gay rights, and so forth. I personally do not doubt that being gay is not a choice, that it's a genetic thing, but why that is a subject of political power instead of any kind of scientific investigation, I'm not quite sure of.
Or I mean, that's a different sort of topic.
But here's another big topic, and your humble servant spent a large part of my life on this subject, which is the creation of life on this earth. I worked with some very wonderful people on a movie called Expelled. And it was about how if you are a teacher or a student and you raise the idea that Darwinism is not a complete and convincing explanation for the creation of life and for the mutation of species, you are fired and you cannot get a job anywhere else. And yet there is no convincing evidence about how anything random created life. I worked on this movie for 2 or 3 years. We traveled all over the world investigating it, talking to the greatest minds in the world about Darwinism, including the redoubtable and very handsome Richard Dawkins. And even he could not find any evidence at all that Darwinism explained the creation of life. And I remember very well interviewing him in Britain. And I said, well, then where did life come from? And he said, well, maybe people from another planet came down here and seeded the earth with life. And I said, so even Richard Dawkins believes in people from another world? And he got so mad at me. And his friends and followers wrote hate mail to me and terrible, terrible, terrible things to me. But unfortunately, it was still true. There is no evidence because Darwinism explains anything.
What you did to Richard Dawkins, most people don't have the ability to do, right? So when Richard Dawkins speaks, he sort of puts people into this like tranquil little like it's almost like this he's like one of those old school Ben Crazy hypnotists. And he knows, but the problem is most people aren't bright enough like you were to ask him the most basic question, which he simply couldn't answer. And I've seen the movie. It's incredible. Please watch it.
Couldn't even come close to answering Expelled. It's out on DVD. It's an extremely interesting movie. And it was done with an extraordinary production values. It's a, if I may say so, a beautiful thing. But we can go into finance. We can go into finance. For years and years and years, I worked in finance, writing about financial misconduct for Barron's, a wonderful, wonderful magazine. And I could not find, and there was a thing going on then called junk bonds, and it was being spread all around the world by a very, very successful investment bank called Drexel Burnham Lambert. And I investigated it and found it just did not make sense arithmetically and statistically. It just did not make sense. And I talked to many people from that world, and none of them could ever show me how it made sense. And finally, some very smart guy at Harvard Business School did a huge amount of numbers crunching and found that indeed it was based on fraudulent data. Well, after that, I wrote about it for Barron's. At that time, Barron's was edited by a very, very smart guy named Alan Abelson. He had a lot of guts, and he ran my long story about it. The biggest, Drexel junk bonds, the biggest scam in history. Banner headline across the front page. When the day it appeared, my editor called me and said, "Don't start your car yourself this morning."
To close out of the people that are listening, he's also referring obviously to Michael Milken. And one of my favorite stories is Ben really did help put Michael Milken away. And without you, I mean, Michael Milken, there's a good chance might not have gone to prison. And
well, he probably
all because of that stupid chance meeting he had with you in Norman.
Yeah, that was an amazing thing.
I mean, in Norman Lear's office.
Well, down the hall from Norman's office. And when I first came to Hollywood in 1976, I worked for Norman Lear, a wonderful man. And down the hall from his offices in Century City, not his studio, but his accounting and so forth offices, there was a door that said Drexel Burnham High Yield Bond Department. And I went in through the door and I said, "I'm Ben Stein. I write a lot for Barron's. I'm very interested in knowing how these high yield bonds work. I mean, I would like to have some high yield bonds." And so they brought out Milken himself to talk to me. And he said, our bonds pay a higher rate than regular bonds. And they have what's called a sinking fund, so that money is set aside to redeem the bonds when the term of the bonds is over. And so they're safer than regular bonds, even though they're called junk bonds, and they pay a higher interest rate, and they're just a great thing. And I said, "Well, sir, I just don't see arithmetically how such a thing is possible." And he got up and walked out of the room without saying a word.
And then years later, you were at his going away. You got somehow invited to his going to prison party.
Well, I will tell one of his friends, a person who's really a wonderful guy, Steve Wynn, whom I happened to meet, I don't remember exactly how, said, "Why don't you come to his going away party?" Which was in a very modest banquet hall near Warner Brothers in the Valley. And at a certain point, Steve Wynn came and said, "You've probably been here long enough. You're probably not the most popular guy here. It might be safer if you left."
I still can't believe you went. You don't go to places like that.
I know. I wouldn't do it now.
On that note, if you just tuned in, I want to get to something next, though. If you just tuned in, you are listening to The World According to Ben Stein. Please keep downloading the podcast. It means the world to us. And also benstein.substack.com. Next up, take it one step further. The guy who, what's his name? That just died. The guy that scammed everybody out of billions of dollars.
You mean Madoff?
Madoff called you and tried to get you in.
Not Madoff. One of the people who worked for him, who had gone to my son's boarding school, but not with my son. He had gone there a few years before Tommy, but he presumed upon the connection with the boarding school to get an interview with me. And he asked me to invest $10 million, which to me at the time was a very large amount of money. It's an even larger amount now. And it's a very large amount to me now. And he asked me if I wanted to invest in it. He said, "I have an investment here and a guy who can make this money grow at certain rates." I forget what it was, 8 or 12%. It's a very good rate. No matter what the stock market does, he can make it grow. He has figured out a way of arbitraging stocks and options, and he can make it grow at that rate no matter what. And I said to him, "Sir, that is simply impossible. It cannot happen. I've talked to Warren Buffett about similar investments. I'm very happy that I'm a friend of Warren Buffett's." And he said, "Well, okay." And he said, could you even, I think he said something like, "Well, could you put in 5 million?" I said, "No, I'm not going to put in any." And so he left. But anyway, so that's the turn.
Okay, so getting back to it, so I want to come full circle on this. We're talking about realism that isn't real. Everything for the past 30 minutes that we, or so that we've been touching on is this sort of realism or fantasyism that people start believing in. If you were to take yourself just out of the equation, if somebody comes to you and promises you this or says this is possible, and you've brought it up where we don't have a media that is the safeguard. We don't have any more safeguards. So people are, I mean, this might be been the most gullible, duped generation. I don't know, since I've been on.
I think ever, well, this goes back to the original duping, which is that all men are created equal. I mean, all men are created equal in the United States under the Constitution. We all have equal rights. That's for sure. But that we're all created equal in terms of equal ability, equal decency, equal responsibility, equal morality. That is total nonsense. And that has always been total nonsense. And that is a scary thing that anyone believes in that.
No, I mean, you know what? Because nobody explains it like you just did, right? Because when you say all men are created equal, everybody has to toe the party line.
Right. The party line is that we're all created equal. Black men, white men, Latinos, Asians, we're all created equal. Okay. This is very, very important, because we just learned in some census data that came out, I think either yesterday or today, that the United States is changing ethnically quite a lot. And the white population is shrinking, not fantastically, but quite considerably. And it's going to be largely a different color country. Now, that is going to have some bearing on this country. Countries, it's not just a coincidence. It didn't just happen by accident that the super great high achieving countries in this world are made up of certain ethnic groups, and the low achieving groups, countries, are made of other ethnic groups. Will we be able to absorb these certain other ethnic groups that are generally low achieving and still stay a very high achieving country? We don't know. They still deserve a chance under the Constitution to be all they can be. And that does not mean they will all be investment bankers or they will all be surgeons, but they can all play a useful part in the building of a nation. But that they're all equal, that is just
well, no, but
nonsense.
I mean, take it to the simpler level. You and I were never going to make it to the NBA. You know, we just weren't. There are certain things, Ben. You and I, we have massive fears of height in some ways, right? So you and I were never going to be truckers. Okay, I've had a recurring nightmare, and I've shared this with you, and so have you. I think of like driving like a big rig, or like, you know,
mine is usually a bus,
or mine was also probably a massive bus. You know, we're not like Biden, who's, you know, driven, you know, Mack trucks and 18-wheelers, and that's always been a massive fear of mine. So I'm never going to get, you know, Rock Breath, who's, you know, who drives across country now with his beautiful new RV. I couldn't do it. I could not be on the highway. So we're not all created equal. Rock Breath could just get in his truck with his RV, Ben, and drive it. You and I would be shitting bricks the whole drive.
I don't think I don't know.
If we were driving,
because I would take lots of paregoric, so I wouldn't be.
I know. I say if we were driving.
I know I would be. I would be taking lots of paregoric, so I wouldn't be shitting bricks. But where people are not all created equal, as I say, that is not what that phrase should mean. It should mean we are created equal in terms of our rights under law. And unfortunately, we are seeing a situation where that is no longer true, because, for example, very clearly, at least to me, and I could be wrong, I'm often wrong, Republicans and conservatives no longer have the rights under the Constitution that leftists have. I mean, for example, anyone who went into the Capitol with somebody trying to keep him out and did vandalism or violence there deserves severe punishment, no doubt about it. But someone who was just walking around the grounds and a guard said, "Come on in," and then just walked around looking at the statues and the portraits and then walked out, why does he or she deserve any punishment whatsoever?
And by the way, when you say in trouble, there's a difference between getting in trouble for trespassing and being prosecuted for a felony. Yeah. Okay. I mean, let's be realistic. They didn't do, I can't think of anything off the top of my head that I've seen or heard or any of that stuff. And we've read from Ben Boychuk and heard from Ben Boychuk, who on Julie Kelly on his site has done so much reporting of where the cameras, none of us could see anything. Ben, at best, it'd be trespassing. At best.
Well, I think if the guards are welcoming them in, and I've seen video of the guards welcoming them in, I don't think it's even that.
I said at best.
the idea of calling this an insurrection when it was really at most trespassing with a bunch of nutcases. Some of them were dressed in weird, funny outfits like Halloween people. That's unbelievable. And that is Stalinism. That is making up charges that simply don't exist. I mean, God bless those Capitol Police. They're fine people, but they should have just stood at the door and said, "You're not allowed in." And
do you know what that jackass that used to be Bush's spokesperson said, Nicole Wallace, who just wants to be so much loved?
I don't know who she is.
She was one of his, I believe she was one of his press secretaries for a minute, or she worked under him in some sort of way. She said basically Trump met with Ashley Babbitt's family, the woman that was murdered by the police. And it's funny that we can never say somebody's murdered by the police. It's like the left owns murdered by the police. We could say, but we can't say, God forbid, she was murdered by the police. She said this is going to cause extremism. Trump meeting the parents of this girl that was murdered that day is going to cause. I mean, and that's but Ben, that's their realism. And I don't know, and I wanted to ask you that. How was the media towards right now? There's only so much covering for Biden they could do. The world is seeing the disgrace that's going on in Afghanistan. Mayorkas the other day admitted that the border is a mess. They can't contain this. In the 70s with Carter, there were 3 networks. There were a few many big newspapers. How were they able to contain it under Carter? The oil crisis.
Not at all. Carter was subject to extreme criticism. No, the media has become solidified, has become one first gelatinous and now quite solid, a block against the truth, and that's a very, 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 very bad situation, a terrible, scary situation, and I've never seen anything quite like it, except it happened during Watergate. It's now been 52 years since, I'm sorry, I beg your pardon, roughly 50 years since the Watergate break-in. Still, no one knows what the burglars were doing there. No one knows what they were looking for. Did they take anything? As far as I know, no. Did anyone at the White House tell them to go there? As far as I know, no. And yet the whole media of this country turned against Nixon to the point of forcing out of office a man who had just won the largest electoral victory in history. This was, I think, the beginning of the end of America as a free country. The media had decided it was in charge, and that was it.
But before the show, you said to me, and everybody, both of us are in the same boat. Although I'll say, I don't know what to believe. There's nothing. I won't put anything past anything anymore. And you believe that it to have been a conspiracy.
Yeah, the conspiracy. Here's what I think the conspiracy was. And if I get murdered in the next few days, then it's because I revealed the conspiracy. I think the Russians were so furious when Nixon went to China because they realized that it meant that they were now encircled by hostile communist powers, because China was a super powerful hostile communist power, and all the Eastern European countries that had been satellites and slaves to Russia hated them. So they were the only country in the world surrounded by hostile communist powers. Plus, there was the United States, which was certainly not their friend. And I think the KGB was so furiously angry at Nixon for doing this that they arranged the whole thing. I think working through the CIA, which I think has always been largely, not entirely at all, a captive of the KGB.
Okay, so somebody,
the framing of Nixon.
Somebody in the chat brought up something that's been dispelled, because we know this to be the case, that Nixon, with cash payments, Nixon said absolutely no on the cash.
He said it would be easy, but it would be wrong. That's for sure.
So there you. So that's the spoken word of
That's on
Richard.
the tapes. Yeah,
Yeah,
that's on the tapes. Somebody said. Nixon said, "Okay." Somebody said to him, "Why don't we just bribe these guys to not say anything?" And Nixon said, "Well, how much would it cost?" And so this person, who I forget who it was, said about $1 million. And Nixon said, "Well, we could raise it. It would be easy, but it would be wrong. That's for sure." And that was the end of it.
So, and as we're running out of time, there's something, because I was talking to Tommy about this today, and he wasn't familiar with it, and most people aren't familiar with it because it's rarely taught in. But as they're talking about jabbing people and jabbing pregnant women and with the vax, when thalidomide was a very big drug when what in the 50s?
I think it was in the late 50s, early 60s.
And it was just a drug that they were told to take, right, for cramps
no, tranquilizer. Early and very effective tranquilizer.
And very safe.
Considered to be very safe.
And what was it proven otherwise, Ben Stein?
Yes, very, very much proven. Otherwise, it turned out that it caused very severe birth defects, and so that was the end of it as a safe drug. But
so my question,
it was a very safe drug until that.
Right, but my question is, everybody loves to say, as you said with science before. No, I wish more people would say, like you say, I don't know. And it's like every medicine that's on television, as the two of us well know with medicines, has a million side effects that they say.
Not like that. Not like thalidomide.
No. That's not what I'm saying. That's not where I'm going with this. But with the vaccination, you don't see any, like, underneath. You don't see any TV commercials. Go get the Moderna vaccination. It might cause you to have 104 fever. It might cause you to pee on yourself in the middle of the night. It might cause you to have night sweats.
Is that unusual?
No, and it's amazing that this thing, Ben, every single drug that the FDA puts out, and with the vaxes don't have the FDA approval, every single drug has a list of 76 side effects that we both take something, and I don't want to say what it is because it has dire, gross consequences, which is our stomach medicine, which is the Linzess. Right, where it says a certain side effect, and as we both of us well know, it's not the side effect; it's the exact effect. And then with the vaccines, you don't see any commercials where they're giving you where they're. That's a brilliant point. That's a brilliant point. Where they're allowing us to educate ourselves. If you educate yourselves, it's like you're going against Stalin.
That's right. I mean, I think it would be fair to say to the American people, it's extremely important that you get this vaccination, and I certainly believe it is extremely important. But you should be warned that it is highly likely that after the second shot, you're going to have some adverse side effects. I wouldn't even say side effects. You're going to have fever, chills, nausea, dizziness. You're going to have some bad effects. You're not getting away free. And by the way, just so you know, Norma, I did Billy Joel in We Didn't Start the Fire. That's how I learned about thalidomide. He didn't explain what it was, and he didn't explain what it did. It was a brilliant line in one of his in We Didn't Start the Fire. And also thalidomide, there's tons of drugs that thalidomide probably helps people with cancer. It helps people with tumors, but it was told at that point that it was safe for pregnant women to take. So unless Ben, we have to get back to the facts. Well, the facts, the fact, but I think even your next show should be Dragnet. An intelligent person, even knowing the side effects and the effects of the vax, should have the vax. I don't say you should be shot if you don't have it, but you have to have the vax.
But you know what, though, Ben, I understand a lot of people not wanting. I mean, when you think about it, so many people that have had the vax continually get COVID. So again, we don't know.
When you say so many, I don't.
Well,
I'm not sure,
well, listen,
how many is so many.
Ben, there's a cruise ship which obviously probably has 1,000 people on it or more. 27 of the people who are all vaccinated on that cruise ship got COVID that they so far that's a pretty high percentage.
It's less than 3%.
And we do know that Pfizer hasn't been completely honest, as they're saying now, that their vaccine isn't great at protecting against the Delta variant. I hate even giving these things names.
Yeah.
And
believe me, as we've discussed many times on this program, there's going to be some more variants. Delta is not the end of it. There's going to be the alpha and the omega too.
Oh my God! It's they're going to go through the whole Greek. I mean, that's just pretty much their goal is to go Greek. Listen, we're running out of time. I just want to tell people in California, Ben and myself, Ben and I each got in the mail recall ballots for Gavin Newsom. And this is what I'm encouraging everybody to do. First of all, it's really simple. If you live in California, if you have friends in California, tell them to open their mail. And all you have to say is, I'm for the recall, and who you're going to vote for, and that be hopefully Larry Elder. Now, here's the catch to that. A lot of you might know people that are elderly that don't always read their mail. It's okay to take their mail and ask them nicely if you could open it and tell them Larry Elder's running.
He's a great guy.
And he's a great guy. And you know what, Ben? Because my point being is we have to start ballot harvesting too.
I couldn't agree more.
And I on that note, Ben, I want you to tell us one quick story that'll make me feel just a good story.
I'll tell you a good story. 48 years ago, I was in the East Room of the White House crying my eyes out because Richard Nixon was resigning, and I thought my life was over. And tonight I'm at our house in Malibu, which is a beautiful house overlooking the Pacific Ocean. And I have two nurses here with me because I hurt my knee quite badly. And later tonight, my wifey, who's an actual saint, and I will have yummy, delicious steak for dinner. And there are a lot of problems in this America, but day by day, life is great.
And on that note, I want to thank everybody that's been listening. I want to thank everybody that's going to be listening on the podcast. Remember, The World According to Ben Stein. You could download it everywhere. Of course, you could also get Ben's newsletter, benstein.substack.com. He's got a brilliant new piece in his daily diaries in spectator.org. That's
about a lesson about how to make French toast.
Yes. And I wanted to read more about, the next time I want to see a daily diary, I want the mention of The World According to Ben Stein.
Good point. Very good point.
Because we are in some of your daily diaries.
You're right.
And on that note, Ben, also really, like I've brought up in the past, it's really important. Conservative newspapers, conservative sites don't have the advertising dollars that a lot of other sites have. People are scared to advertise with them. A lot of them are 501c3s like spectator.org. They're nonprofits. If you could throw a few dollars their way, it's been around for years. They're great people there. Bellotti, the editor, is an amazing guy.
Bob Carroll, publisher, an amazing guy.
Please give if you can. And on that note, Ben Stein, it's Saturday night, so take us out.
We are soldiers in the army. We have to fight. Although we have to die, we have to fight on, children, till the day that we die. Well, my mother was a soldier. She had her hand on the gospel plow. One day she got very weary. She couldn't fight anyhow. She just said, we're going to stand here and fight on anyhow.
Okay, just so everybody knows, I don't want to ruin 1 second. Ben's neighbors were annoying him with music. I think if you got out there like your son suggested with a boombox and blasted that, you would have no more noise problems, Ben Stein.
I think the people out here